Welcome to Homekeepers. Thank you for stopping by.
I'm so pleased to be here.
And I'm anxious for my viewers to hear your story, which is quite amazing. Were you raised in a Christian home?
I was.
And did the music come from that?
No.
No?
My dad used to joke all the time that he can play a radio.
No kidding.
No, my mom's a pretty good singer, but I was sort of the black sheep of the
Did
family.
they just kind of hear your voice and say there's something there?
You know, I didn't even start out as singing. It started off as piano. My mom says when I was 3, I used to have tantrums because I couldn't get the music in my head to come out right on the piano, and I begged and begged for lessons. We had a piano, and I don't know what it was. I just knew I had to play it, and sort of accidentally got into singing. I sang in choirs and things and did a lot of theater, and that was where we sort of learned that I could sing.
And you trained for opera, didn't you?
I did. My undergraduate was in piano, and when I went for the piano audition, they had a voice audition, and my choir teacher said, well, just try out. And I said, why would I do that? I don't want to be a singer. And he said, just try out. And I ended up with a scholarship for voice, which I had to study voice to keep. So I studied voice, and by the end of college it was sort of clear to me that the Lord was leading me in that direction as opposed to professional piano. So I went to grad school for opera.
Yeah, but the Lord thoroughly trained you for what you do now. That's a worship leader.
Mm-hmm.
But you start, and I'd like to see more in church of people loving the classics and even appreciating opera. But the music you're doing now is 180 from that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is not classical at all. No, I think it's funny because I took this church job, and I signed my contract, and the ink was still wet on the page, and the senior pastor said, well, oh, by the way, we don't know if we forgot to mention that we want you to transition us from traditional to contemporary, and we'll need you to start a band. And I said, oh,
okay.
By the way, I'm an opera singer. I'd be terrible. And he said, no, we really think you're going to start a band. So I prayed about it a lot, and had no idea what the Lord was doing, but really did feel that He was leading me that way. And so I do thank my congregation for being so patient while I learned how to do that.
Yes, I want to mention you do have a brand new CD out.
Mm-hmm.
Did you write a lot of the things on this?
Yeah, I did. My first 2 CDs, I wrote all of them, and that one I co-wrote a number of them, and then there's some old things that I love. There is one classical piece on there that I've done to close shows a lot by Paul Mons, and a couple of hymns that I just enjoy, but the rest are written by me.
So you do it all. You write, you sing, you arrange it.
If it's musical.
Yeah. Now, there came a point when your dad was diagnosed with ALS, and
Yes.
that was a real blow.
Yes.
That began a series of events in your life.
It sure did. Yeah, I was still teaching voice. I was teaching opera at Cedarville University, and I was singing with the symphony and doing all these things, and sort of asking God, why do you have me in this church job? This is going to wreck my voice, you know. And when my dad was diagnosed, it just changed everything for us. You know, you have a family tragedy or a personal tragedy or something like that happens, and very quickly you realize what's important and what's not. And what was important to us was God, and He was so faithful to us. And as my dad was ill, he loved me to death, but he was not a great opera fan. And I made him a CD, actually, for his Christmas present, for his last Christmas. And it was with the band and some of the music I'd written for the band, and it was contemporary, and I just wanted him to have it. And we were amazed. I never thought it would be heard outside my church. And within 6 or 9 months, that had gone all over the world. We just had hundreds of little radio stations playing it. We'd get mail from South Africa. And
Is that this one?
no, that's my first one was called Be Still.
That you made specially for your dad?
For my dad.
And now, you had 2 daughters and then a son. Was the son born after your dad was diagnosed?
Yeah, he was. And my dad was ill just under 3 years. So, and Toby was born about a year into my dad's illness.
And I've never heard of what your son had, but you noticed behavior that was certainly not, apparently like your daughters had exhibited.
Yeah, no, my daughters are perfectly fine. Toby was just a tough baby. He was hard to keep happy, and he wouldn't let anybody hold him ever except me and sometimes my husband, and he cried all the time and he couldn't sleep, and he never learned to speak. He wouldn't babble or make sounds like other babies, and it was just very concerning. And this was at the same time that my dad was really suffering, and we just felt like we were in a pit, really, and we didn't know what was wrong with Toby.
How old was he when you thought, something's wrong here? He wasn't just a fussy baby.
Well, really, we had a couple other things happen that made us think, well, maybe that was it. He had such terrible ear infections that he was actually clinically deaf. So we thought, well, maybe he's not learning to hear, he's not learning to speak because he can't hear, and some other things. But when we got all those cleared up, it was really about 16 months, 18 months, his behavior was so extreme and it was getting worse. And he was losing things that he had started to learn, and we thought, this isn't normal. This isn't a fussy baby. This isn't a picky personality. There's something really wrong here with
And how old was he then?
He was maybe 16 or 18 months old at that time.
He was diagnosed with sensory processing disorder. Had you ever heard of that?
Never heard of it. And my dad passed away right in August, and 2 weeks later it was Toby's 2nd birthday, and we had worked all summer to get him in a speech therapy program because we didn't know what to do, but we figured at least we knew he should be able to talk. So we thought we'll start with what we know, and that speech therapy program had an occupational therapist on staff, and she said, "Have you heard of this?" And I said, "I've never heard of it," and she explained it to me.
I have a feeling that most of our viewers have never heard of it.
Yes, well, she explained it to me, and I was just like, you know, check, 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 every single one of those lines up. And what it is, in essence, is that his brain, it's a neurological issue. His brain doesn't process sensory input correctly, and for him, it's different for lots of kids, it looks different. But for him, he was so hypersensitive to touch, and his brain would understand what he was feeling. So if he got water on him, he thought he was being burned, and touch hurt him, and his clothes hurt him, and
that is amazing.
Food hurt his mouth, so he couldn't eat. And they described like eating for him was like people just scraping their nails down a chalkboard. It was just intolerable.
Did onlookers think he was just kind of bratty, that he needed a little bit of discipline?
I had a lot of, you know, if you would just be firm with your child, he would eat, you know, and I thought, well, my daughters are eating red pepper hummus. It's not that we don't know how to feed our children, it's that, you know, he just couldn't do it. And so we got him into therapy, but the amazing thing was he started therapy. I love this. It's such a miracle, especially for us right after Dad died. So we have this terrible tragedy, and I was really in despair, and Toby started therapy, and we did not know what his prognosis was. We didn't even know if he'd be functional, you know, but he could only cry. He cried all the time, and he could say bo and ma. Those were his only sounds that he had.
Do you know what they meant?
Yeah, bo meant anything wet. That was what he said for his cup, or the rain, or the ocean. I don't know where he got it. And ma meant me. And within 4 weeks of therapy, he said it was very slurred, but we understood him. He said, "I love you, Mom." And
what kind of therapy was it?
It's occupational therapy. There's no drugs. There's no medication. It's play therapy. He loved therapy. They would take him and they'd swing him in weird ways, and they'd put him in a ball pit. And
he didn't scream?
Well, he didn't like some of it at the beginning, but what they tell me is if you catch it young enough, in a way it was a real blessing to us that he was so extreme, because if he hadn't been, we wouldn't have had him diagnosed so young. If they can get them in therapy before they're 3, their brains are still so plastic at that age, they can actually rewire their brain.